I've just met with Laurent Rousseau, and actually what such a thought-provoking conversation. It was incredible. It was insightful. It was impactful.
It was quite disarming, actually. I don't know what I expected, but it was more kind of lyrical, his answers, and the way he expressed himself was really beautifully done, and some great advice and tidbits that I'm definitely going to listen back to time and time again.
Yeah, his thoughts on career versus ambition, his thoughts around failure
were great. Loved that.
Even the book that he recommended wasn't your sort of typical business book that you can pick up off the shelf. It was just a really incredible, interesting conversation.
No, I think I look forward to the listeners hearing it.
Laurent, thank you very much for coming today. It's a pleasure to speak with you. I thought we'd get straight to it, and really interested to hear some of the 2 or 3 sort of pivotal moments in your career that have shaped how you lead teams, how you lead people, how you lead companies.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I think the first one is very much, in chronological order, is when my first job as an equity research analyst, where, I was just 20, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do in life, and I could just pick a job that I could relate to my studies. And research taught me to have strong views, to have convictions, and to make them known, and to be able to put them across. And that, I think, is a very healthy thing to do. Is first of all to have views and then express them, and that, I think, that sense of knowing where you stand and making it clear has stuck with me. And in terms of leadership, that clarity and that commitment is very important. The second one was more personal, I guess. It was the discovery of parenting. So I became a father, and I was not particularly young. I was 33. And then I got into industrial production, and we have 4 kids. Yeah. But it's really great to see this kind of raw little people, who look up to you for good and for bad. Who you want them to be free in their mind. You don't want them to be a copy of yourself, and have that balance of authority. Sometimes means being tough. Sometimes it means putting a distance, explaining that, the worlds are different and they can't do everything. And empathy, in a family, it's called love. And that balance, I think, has been really a great learning curve. And the third one is much more professional, is when I started leading a turnaround of a specialty insurance business in 2018. So for those of you listening who will remember that, the P&C business at the time was, how do you say in English, a dog's breakfast. No one could make any money. And I was 36, and I was given that hard task to turn it around, which meant really deep restructuring, which meant letting some people go. And then very quickly meant as well, and if anything, most importantly, bringing them in a construction, in a growth story, in something positive. And that, I think, again, that balance between the toughness of a turnaround and the inspiration of something to be rebuilt was a great learning curve.
Do you consider yourself sort of a turnaround expert or a growth expert? Is there any sort of experience that put you in that position to be able to do that?
No, I'm an expert of nothing.
Okay.
If anything, if I'm, okay at is at understanding people and situations, and understanding what's very unique. People tend to overestimate what's unique about themselves in the first place, what's unique about a situation, versus what's actually very typical, very standard, almost in a way. And so I've always liked diversity of situations, of people, of momentum. For 10 years I was an investment banker, and then you have a huge homogeneity of people there, which is on the one hand great, on the other hand a bit dry. But then that investment banking experience gave me huge exposure to very different situations, growth-led, turnaround-led, stability, status quo. So I've been in very different situations, and I would want to see myself as able to read the environment, whatever shape that is.
And what did you find when you took that first leadership role in your career was the biggest surprise or challenge when assuming that role?
I would challenge a bit. This view of leadership roles is a very subjective thing in the sense that, people say, okay, what does that mean? Does it mean that that's when you start leading people? Is it that you start leading numbers in the sense of a P&L? Does it mean actually it's more of a personal leadership? I quite like that last version. I think we all in a leadership role when you start on a day-to-day basis is back to what I was saying, is what are your values, what do you believe in, and how do you lead your life around it. And so, when I was like an equity research analyst, there was no leadership role in the sense of team. I was, the most junior and struggling to, lead myself. I didn't have much of a P&L either. But like the leadership in the sense of, having a research report with your name on, with the institution that you belong to on, stating a view on a business, on a company that you want to sell, buy, or hold. This is leadership as well. So I think you don't have to lead people or so on. So I think those, I guess in a common sense, when people talk about leadership roles, it's when it comes with people. Yeah. Which I think is of course a very specific dimension. But this is something I often tell the youngsters, leadership starts, every day. And you don't have to be a certain age. And then, the other way around, say, it's easy for you to say that you're a leader or you're in a certain seniority position. I think I've never worked as hard as when I was younger or thinking of myself as having responsibility even when I was 21, maybe a little too much. Maybe I was taking things too seriously. So I think this kind of leadership roles is something that I try to invite people to think of a bit differently. Yeah. I think in the way that is more commonly used, I think my really first leadership role in the sense of people and of diversity of backgrounds, and it's when I became Chief Underwriting Officer of the European business at SCOR in P&C Reinsurance. And here I was given a highly performing, very stable business with people highly experienced. And so I was 36, I was in 2015. And I knew nothing about underwriting. I knew a little bit more intellectually about reinsurance. And that's when I understood that I had to lead not from the brains, not from being, the clever clogs, but by having empathy, by making people want to follow me and having that kind of more, the leadership coming from the heart and the guts, not from the brains and the mouth, if you see what I mean. And that's when you realize that you have to be that inspiring example that then you look at leadership in a more commonly accepted way.
What were some of the practical things that you did when you were in that role, managing people that were sort of old, or leading people that were older, wiser, more experienced than you?
I've always been quite aware of the image I give and that kind of self-awareness of. It's only, I think, for the past couple of years that people have stopped telling me that I look younger than what I am. So,
which is a good thing in some ways, but
less good now. But I was often told, "Oh, you're very young," which is always a relative thing, I guess. I was very often very aware of this and wanting to counter this image, not in a sense of appearing old, but as appearing very unassuming, very kind of making a small thing of a big thing. Maybe I have this title, maybe I have this leadership role, but actually I'm going to learn from you, kind of thing. I'm going to please explain to me. Please forgive me if I ask a stupid question. And having this kind of position of learning the business, of being a student of the business, and also trying to befriend people, and at least at the beginning. I think over time I'm probably harder than what I look like, but the immediate first contact is always super important. And so when I took over that first leadership role, in a sense, it was a big business, it was a highly performing business. It was very obvious that they did not need me in reality. So the reason why I was there was twofold. Was one, for me to learn the business, to learn part of the organization. I guess that was really the expectation of my boss, was in a way to kind of learn, on the ground. And that would be the usefulness to me. The usefulness to the organization was to help the teams understand that a very profitable but stable business had more downside than upside over the long term, and bringing that self-awareness, bringing that idea that we're in a cyclical industry, things might change. So I think as long as you do this in a friendly and assuming way, yet ambitious, yet pretty clear as to where you think we should go, but taking it step by step. So that, I think, was the mental framework. The reality, to your question, Guy, was a lot more basic. Is I remember very well a lady, she's now retired, she was leading the French market, which for SCOR is a big thing. And she was, late 50s, and I knew her already for a while. And she came to see me once and she told me, Laurent, you're not going to force me to work over the weekend. You know that. And it spooked me. It's kind of saying, okay, why does she think I would do that? And I think it prompted several questions in me, saying, clearly she sees that I do this, which is okay. I have nothing to hide. And that's, I'm a tedious person. I need to work more to be on top of things. That's good for me. But the fact that it's so visible is interesting. The fact that second, which is something different, the fact that she thinks I might impose it on her is another dimension. So I had to this is what I meant when I said you have to lead them for a lot less from the brains, a lot more from, hearts and guts, is without being disingenuous, trying to be quite focused on what's good for you, how do you manage yourself, and what image you project. And I think this kind of shock with reality, that kind of image of myself that came to me, clearly that one I was not prepared for, how self-aware I wasn't that self-aware, and that for me was a big learning curve. It really got me thinking. So I think being confronted with people who have different motivations, different aspirations, different career paths was super helpful.
Have you, just picking up on that example of French, have you noticed a difference in what it takes to lead in different cultures, in different countries? Because you've obviously grown up sort of around the world. You've worked in France as well as London. Are there any cultural differences in how you lead country to country?
Huge. So I, my family background, both my parents' families came from the French ex-colonies in North Africa. And as a child, I traveled. My dad was an expat. I traveled until the age of 14 in Africa, Middle East, and Northern Europe, which means I came to France age 14, being very French, but very aware of different cultures. And that's a huge part of me today. It's that taste for understanding differences. And you might look at a certain object, actually people look at it very differently. And something I loved is something that, we really, my wife is British, we share that with the kids. It's this multicultural background is part of the things that define me. And the challenge there is to understand who you are. And I think at heart, I'm very French in many ways. That means quite cerebral. That means quite vertical, looking at things top down, looking at things in quite a disciplined way. But I'm very aware of how that can be very different in different places. And so trying to be somebody else is a danger as well. I've seen too many people who've been, who've left their own country for so long that they don't define themselves. They're not quite sure who they are, what they are. And finding that right balance between knowing your roots, knowing where you belong, knowing your history. When you come from ex-colonial background, that carries certain weights. My father grew up in Algeria. I've been to Algeria, and where it has been quite a dramatic exit. So when you're a French person going there, it carries some background. But that for me is, as long as you're aware of this, and as long as you kind of manage to put it aside and turn to others, is really critical. When I started at Credit Suisse, age 21, it's, when you see an Italian, a Spaniard, you don't really know what their family name means, where they come from, what university they went to. That is something, taking people at face value is a huge benefit. I think when you go to more Latin cultures, people try to see through much more quickly, where you're from and have more a socially deterministic background. I think it's still a bit the case in the UK too, where the accent gives away geography and class, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So it's something that I quite have fun with. Sometimes I can be terribly clumsy. I've been living in the UK on and off for 25 years. Sometimes I misread the room terribly, like my in-laws would tell you that. And so having that kind of prudence, that awareness, and yet that prudence is something that is quite fun. It's quite I quite like it. So yes, putting across an idea, putting across an intention is very different. I've been working in large US organizations for now 13 years. It's extremely different than in a French reinsurer where I've spent the same amount of time. So you have to be, adapting, but not too much. I think it's important people can read you, trying to, people expect, me to be French. And not too much, but just enough.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, because one of our questions was going to be, what childhood influences have really helped shape who you are as a leader. And I guess actually that, moving around as an expat child, I'm sure it has informed a lot. But anything else, any individuals from childhood or values from parents or grandparents?
Yeah, I've been lucky enough not just to be privileged. I've been privileged from a social and educational point of view. But I think the biggest privilege is that I come from a very mixed social background. So I have a grandfather who was a sports teacher in Algeria. People often have the wrong image of colonial times. It's very modest people. And on the other hand, on my mom's side was actually family-owned construction business becoming public. So probably a big business. And having this kind of two anchors, and one of them not being corporate life, has been the big privilege. This idea that work is what gets you somewhere. Work, nothing else. Thinking that you're clever is actually perhaps your biggest enemy. So work is there. Second is, the flat is the world is flat. It's you talk to different people in the same way, and you see through those people speaking differently to different people, and that I think has been defining me as well. And for different reasons, quite a few in my family had some military experience that has really gone to my values as well. And that idea to say courage is defining, absolutely. Having that kind of strong views, strong commitments, strong values, and not getting confused between career and ambition is something as well that has been very much key.
That's interesting. Yeah. What do you mean by that? The difference between career and ambition?
Well, you can lose your soul to preserve your career in many ways, or thinking that the ambition is what gets you up in your career is. I think this is right, but the question is, what is the right ambition? And it can take you to very contradictory places, or seemingly contradictory places, whereby the right ambition is actually to say, to take a career risk. That can be positive in the sense that you take a job where there are many risks attached to it. And it can be quite negative as well when you are a CEO of a listed company and your convictions, your guts tell you the right thing is something, but your governance tells you, the board tells you the opposite. what do you do? And that kind of self-preservation, from a career point of view, can be very slippery. And accepting, saying no, accepting that, you know, confrontation can actually preserve those ambitions and sacrifice your career in some way, at least in the short term. I think, you know, being a pleaser or saying yes or putting on yourself something that is impossible is often what gets people a little lost with themselves, with their own values.
That's really interesting. And what about failure? Because we talked a lot about success, but obviously people learn more from sort of failure than success. You know, what moments at any point in your career where you've either had negative feedback or you've led a project that hasn't gone the way it should have gone? Can you talk to failure at all?
Yeah. So failures are a lot more interesting, a lot more rich than victories. That I think is very clear in my mind. But then you need to articulate what is failure. Failure is, you know, first of all, it has to be viewed in a very simple way. It's an outcome. It's when the outcome is the effective outcome is different from the desired outcome in a way. And then I think there has to be very candid and simple views and not over-engineering things. You know, is this what you wanted? Yes, no. Is it what was good for the company? Yes, no. And if it's no, it's a failure. But then it's super important to go one level underneath this and say what was in your control and what wasn't in your control. And that's when you have to accept that, you know, what's not in your control can take over. So the question is, you know, how do you handle what's not in your control? And then there is what's in your control, absolutely. And what's in your control, your own decision-making, your own diagnostic is, have you made the right diagnostic? Have you surrounded yourself with the right team? And that's when things get out of your hands a little bit. So as you know, you have to be able to lead them, to influence them strongly. And then what's the governance of the organization, where, you know, is clearly not in your control. And even a CEO is not completely the boss on everything, right? Mm. He answers to shareholders, he answers to a board, and they might have different views and different motivations. So it's very important to understand where you've truly failed, and without being too harsh about it, in a sense that, you know, you often find two types of people: those who forgive themselves a little too much and you know, blame external circumstances a little much, and some others and who kind of do not recover from a failure and do not have that kind of maturity to understand that yes, they've made some mistakes and that's okay. Did they have a helping hand to get them out of that ditch? Perhaps not, and that's not okay. But that kind of preserve yourself. I think it's you do find people to whom you wish they were a little better friends of themselves, and so, you know, that's okay. You can have failed at something, you can have misread a situation and made some mistakes, but as long as you've tried your best, as long as you've given others a chance to help you, it's okay. And then, you know, external circumstances could have taken the upper hand on it. I think it's this view of failure is very interesting, because that's how you often find in your career people with a very thick skin, a lot of scars on it, and that makes them really fascinating, really experienced, and that's the right term, experienced. And you have many others whom you actually don't see anymore. They just disappeared. They never recovered from a failure. They've never I just took them out of the system, and that's probably because their skin was a bit too thin, or they thought they would never recover from a scar. I think as long as this scar is not an integrity scar, as long as it's not one of absolutely binary values of things that you should not be doing to people, I think all of the more professional scars are what makes experience. And then it belongs to yourself to say, okay, this is going to be my little wound that I'm going to nurture. It's going to have its own place, and that's okay. But I'm going to get it under control. I'm going to get over it. And I think it's what makes people very very thoughtful. Like in the US, it's super interesting how entrepreneurs, you're not a proper entrepreneur until you haven't failed, until you haven't kind of, sunk a business or so, and recovered from it. I spend a lot of time with venture funds in tech. It's that founder experience, that founder having gone through difficulties, if not failure, is something that is super important in the entrepreneurial world. And that, I think, is when you go into companies, back to my point on career, the preservation of career takes over, and that acceptance that actually you can try something and fail, and that makes you a better professional, has more, not disappeared, but gone away from corporate world, and has become the feature of the entrepreneurial world. And that's interesting, and that's how you see most companies becoming bureaucracies, career-driven, step-by-step, incremental evolution, progress, promotion, as opposed to, hey, let's try something that perhaps has, huge risks, but, corporates have to take risks. You have to take risk in your career. So I think it's something I enjoy, is keeping in touch with that entrepreneurial world.
And just on advice, what if you could start your career again, or if you what advice would you have for your 25-year-old self, or somebody in the industry at the moment who's in their 20s, who's got ambitions to reach the top? What advice would you give?
I'm a big fan of no regret moves. Mm-hmm. Things can play out differently. Things can be have it back to the outcomes, can be a disappointing outcome. But if you thought things through enough, if you really, thought about it, I think regrets is very kind of, it means that you haven't done your homework beforehand in a way. But if you have, it should be no regret move. So let me answer your question in a way that, what would I advise younger people is, and I'm speaking here of myself here, is be more patient. As patience is not my strength. And that's both good and bad. In very often in leadership roles, part of your job is to give the pace, and at times that pace you have to beat the drum fast, and then at times you need to start beating the drum in a very slow way. I've tended to be quite good at when you go to kind of like a rolling drum kind of thing. I like that, but so being patient is something that good things come with time. As a French person in me saying that, maturity is brings you good things. The second is not be too harsh. I can be tough. I have that very strong sense of what's right and what's not right, what sounds right and what sounds wrong. I think we all like having a narrative about ourselves, about the situation, about what our environment, and it's very important for me to kind of call out those rosy pictures and try and say, okay, this is you're getting confused here between what you wish things were versus what they are. And managing to do that without being too harsh, without breaking the dream or breaking the positivity around situations is difficult. It takes certain characters. Some really want this kind of, brute view of reality. Some others want to be taken by the hand and taken to understand by themselves. And at times I take shortcuts and I don't care enough for sensitivities. Over time, it does come through, but abruptness is sometimes things that can play against the best intentions. 2
questions to finish. What one book has really helped you think about kind of your career, the way that you lead?
So I love reading. I haven't been always reading. I started reading age 16, and then I've become an avid reader since. And I like reading fictions. Fictions are quite good. They bring you to very different worlds. They take you out of your, day-to-day tube line and work environment. So I tried to read some fiction still. It's hard because the work takes over and I then read more business books. But there is one fiction book that is called here are defeats. It's actually a French novelist, Laurent Rousseau, and he wrote that about 10 years ago. And it's a historical fiction where he takes 3 generals who have survived their career. And so Hannibal is one, Haile Selassie in Ethiopia is another one, and General Grant is a third one. And all three, have gone through huge victories. I mean, we know their names. Yeah. And people don't suspect how low their life has been at some point. And he really showed, the novel shows through their lives, and it's intertwining these 3 lives with a archaeologist in Palmyre, which are amazing ruins. You know, how do you look on history? And those generals have gone through actually very difficult times. What you see as a victory very often is the best is behind you. Yeah. And similarly, on the biggest defeats, actually, it can be, and it often is, the foundations to huge rebounds. And you still see it with the lens of negativity. And similarly, when you're at the top of your career, for example, as a sportsman, as a businessman, you actually don't realize that it's the best is behind you. Yeah. And I think that kind of humility in both situations, accepting fate, brings a wiser view on what is success and what is failure. So that it's a very nice book, and it's very simple storytelling, historical fiction.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. And final question is, what's your go-to song to get you pumped for a meeting, or you're listening to from the tube from Fulham, and you've got a busy day ahead? What would you go to? So
I'm a big punk fan, and I love the rock of the 80s and the 90s, and so I've been a big fan of the Pixies for a long time, and they have this song called Cecilia Ann, which has actually no lyrics. I love words, but actually has no lyrics. Mm-hmm. But it's very simple. It's very engaging. It's very American. It's very, you could imagine riding a horse on a, in the Midwest kind of thing.
Yeah.
Going towards the frontier. But it's full of energy, full of simplicity, and I've been listening to it for 30 years.
Oh wow, yeah.
And the kids love it.
Yeah. So that was the Pixies and the songs.
So Cecilia Ann. It's called. Sorry. Yeah. Cecilia Ann.
Very good.
Check that one out.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Laurent. Really
interesting conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.